Kailan Carr is a former teacher with a master's degree in literacy. Her website, kailancarr.com, makes it easy for caregivers to use screen-free activities and more play in their day-to-day. Kailan has published several acclaimed activity books and is the author of the new children's book, Screens Away, Time to Play, which is now available on Amazon. Thank you so much for your time today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So, my first question is a very simple one, which is why is it important for kids to play?
Play is like their life. And as we get older, adults tend to forget how important it is. But so much happens when children are playing. It's laying the foundation for literally the rest of their lives. Their future is based on these early years of play.
Yeah, I mean, we speak about play just in our travels, like speaking to parents and everything like that, but it goes beyond social emotional, right? I mean, obviously
Oh,
they're
yes.
building the skills they need to later
It
use as
is
adults, but it also improves academics for the parents that are worried about that, right? It's like you said, it's
it's
it's everything to kids,
it's
right?
all encompassing, like the physical, like they're learning their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills through play. It's social and emotional. They're doing, learning how to listen to directions, paying attention, resolving conflicts, working things out. Language and literacy, they're learning new words, practicing those words, and then their brain development. It's so huge. And in their executive functioning, like the working memory, their self-regulation, their problem solving. I mean, everything all just comes back to how can you help your child? They need to be playing and reading with them and playing together. It all is so important.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I know there was the recent article in the Journal of Pediatrics. You probably saw it about the importance of play.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they stressed was undirected play, right? So it's not
Mm-hmm.
that structured play that parents are setting up or activities where we're saying, stand this, do that. Is that right? Like, is that
Yes.
something that you would
And I
speak to?
often say, like, my business, I do screen-free activities and I have printables and I have quiet book templates. And it might seem like I'm like, here, do this activity. You want this, you want this. But those are for like the little pockets of your day where you need something. Like maybe you want to have them do something structured while you are fixing dinner, or you need to go somewhere, you're at a restaurant and you need something there to keep them busy, like appointments. That's where like my activities are great for. And then I am just absolutely 100% behind giving kids the time and the space to play and do what they want. And well-meaning adults, like, we have this pressure from society with Pinterest and social media,
Yeah.
blogs, and even if it's screen-free activities, it's this like pressure and notion that like we have to find these things for kids to do and they need to be entertained, and I need to find these fun things for them to have a great childhood. And it's just so not the case. I say you're not a cruise director. Like, your job is to let your child figure out what they want to do. It's a huge learning skill for them to be bored, figure out what they want to do, and go from there.
Yeah, totally. They know what to do. It's very natural for them. So while if a kid that's not used to that undirected play might maybe struggle in the beginning or say they're bored or whatever, in my experience and just in the research and everything else, if you leave them alone, they
Yeah,
will figure it out. They're
they
equipped
will.
to do this.
And
Yeah.
that's why, like, if the iPad or the device or whatever it is out of sight, it's out of mind, and then they figure it out. Like, if it's somewhere nearby, it's like that's what they're gravitating to. If it's not an option, like in a car ride, we go on long road trips and I don't bring anything because I don't want that option and I don't want it to be a kid's option. And they find things to do. They look out the
Yeah.
window, they read books, I have some activities. I have a rule where, like, if it's over like 4 hours, like we've been on really long road trips before, I will bring things to do and do some games and stuff like that. But if it's like 2 or 3 hours, I'm like, okay, kids, you figure out what you're bringing along to keep yourself entertained. And if you don't have it, then you can just sleep or look out the window or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Okay. Well, you brought up the iPad. So, how do you think play has been impacted given the rise of modern screen technology use in kids?
I mean, now kids, I know my kid's kindergarten teacher, she asked like what their favorite game was when they came to school. And she said almost all of them said a video game. And like they're not, so they're replacing, it's play, but it's just a different, very different kind of play than what kids need. And they are actually, screens are replacing, that's the concern, is that they're replacing all of the important developmental activities that kids need to be doing to form that foundation to grow their brain. And screens just do not, there's so many studies, they do not provide that same interaction benefits, learning skills than just being in person, in a room with a person or with toys, manipulating, hands-on. That eye contact is so important. Like the videos that kids watch of other people, there's famous YouTubers and things that are supposed, that teach your kids, and it's not the same.
Hmm. Can we push on that a little bit more? Can you elaborate? Because this is the biggest question and or the thing that I think parents might push back a little bit more. Well, they're online, they're socializing with friends, they're chatting, they're having a great time. So can you elaborate a little bit more on if playing, I mean, you've already said playing on a screen is not the same as real life,
Hmm.
but I mean, are there more reasons for that, or is it pretty much what you covered already?
Yeah, I mean, there's research, like how kids learn their like vocabulary. It's through serve and return relationships, and even that emotional connection and that bond, it's just not present on a screen. So like when you are having a conversation, or even if young kids aren't even able to talk, but like a child is in a stroller and points at a dog, and then the parent, so that's the serve, and then the parent responds and says, oh yeah, that's a dog, you're returning it, and then you can elaborate and say what color it is. And then I just think of those times when like a child might be in a stroller looking at a device, and like that whole scenario just is gone. Like that serve and return relationship is missing, and then that's not happening on devices, even if like there's pauses, like where the child is supposed to answer. It's like it's not real. It's just not real, and they're not getting that same benefit. And then just the emotional connection between, I mean, even as kids get older, I was reading something, I don't remember where it was, but the kids like feel like they're going to, be, they're connected with their friends online, but
Yeah.
when they really need somebody, like those friends don't show up. The friends in real life would show up, but like it's just superficial. It's just
Right.
not on a deeper level where you can really lean on somebody online. It's just very much disconnected.
Yeah, this is a question that comes up all the time with our contributing experts. And one of them likened it to skating on the surface, right? Like there's just so much more beneath that. You're getting
Mm-hmm.
kind of a very superficial. And then if you were to dig a little bit deeper, we could talk about, some of those feel good chemicals, right? Like when you're
Yeah.
on the device, you're getting dopamine, which feels good. You can also get dopamine in person, but you're not getting the oxytocin, you're not getting the serotonin, you're not getting maybe the endorphins if you're moving around, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even if we look at it on the brain level, you're only getting a small sliver of the positive benefits you could get from being in person. And then you mentioned nonverbal cues earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is huge. This is the way kids learn is
Mm-hmm.
by looking at your face, looking at expressions,
Yeah.
even just like kind of the vibe of being in
Mm-hmm.
person, right? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
things that probably we don't even understand about what our brains are taking and being in person. And it's like you said, it's not that we're saying you can't ever do it. or that there isn't some benefit. I think it goes more to what you were saying earlier, which is that it's replacing a lot of
Mhm.
those experiences that they could be learning from, right? So
Right.
it goes back to balance, which I think we both, are on the same page there.
Right. Like my kids have screen time, but
Yeah.
it's just, I want my tagline is prioritizing play. Like I want play to be the first option for them. I want everything, I want them reading, I want them, playing with friends in real life. And like if we have extra time or if we fill in a gap and then screen time is available. But I didn't want it to replace, you know, going out and about in public. I wanted my kids to learn how to be in public and socialize and not just automatically go to that device that sucks them in and makes them like just not even aware of what's going on around them. And that's a huge worry for me is that we're raising a generation of kids that are going to be bored with real life because they're not getting the dopamine from as much. You get a lot of dopamine from using screens. Um, and then real life is just going to be boring to them.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think what you said about paying attention in public is so important too, because you gave the example of the stroller for younger kids and pointing to something interacting. But kids are even learning, like, let's say in a restaurant, from looking around, watching other people engage or relate, or kids are learning from everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, we are definitely taking some of those experiences away from them when, we suck them into something, which I get it. It's convenient. You might just want to have a nice dinner, like
Mm-hmm.
no judgment. But I think if we reframe it as thinking about kids learning, from those
Mm-hmm.
moments, I think it's just really an awareness thing, I think.
Right. And I
Yeah.
really try to I remember in my head like I don't judge anybody who's out there on a screen because like for example, we went on a road trip, like I said, we like camps for like 3 weeks. They had very minimal screen time. And we got to our last destination. It was my nephew's birthday, and they wanted to do a special movie, so we set up a TV outside of our camper. And I'm like, people walking by might be thinking, what are they doing? They're in this beautiful place and they're watching TV. And I wanted to just be like, you have no idea, like, what we've been through, like, so it's just a constant reminder. Like, you never know what kind of day they had, if this is a regular thing or if it's just like an emergency thing. And so I really try not to judge anyone's screen use. Everyone, is coming from a different place, but it's just you have to think about what are you doing daily? Is that
Hmm.
always the default to go to the restaurant and pull out the phones for the kids or the device? And if so, if that's the one time that you want to use, your screens, then that's your decision. It's different for every family and what works for you. But I always feel like it's important. What are you teaching kids? What is the model we're expecting? What is life going to be like in 10, 20 years when this whole generation is coming up and we're all more connected to our devices than the people that we're with?
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about this idea that we talk to our parents about in the parent eds, which is what we call digital privilege. And the way we speak about it, it's that there's a few things, many things that can affect your ability to limit tech, right? Which is a privilege. So it can be
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic status. It could be how much you work, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
might have financial privilege, but you have to work 60 hours a week to get
Right.
it,
So your
right?
time is
Or access
limited.
to family support.
Mm-hmm.
You might have an amazing grandma that lives close by that can help, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we absolutely teach parents to come at these issues with a place of empathy because, like you said, you don't know what that other person's going through, and I think you and I can have these conversations from a place where we have the ability to sit with our kids, watch our kids, create activities for our kids, right? But
Right.
I just feel for that single mom, with two jobs and four kids, right? That might just be coming from a completely
Absolutely.
different place. So
Absolutely. And
I'm
that's
glad you brought
what's
that up because I think it's so important. as we have
ma-
these conversations.
and it's maddening to me because it's the blame of too much screen time is being put on parents, when in
Yeah.
actuality it's the whole model of handing it over to the kids and big tech companies, and Meta and Netflix and YouTube, like the platforms and the persuasive design that they have implemented to keep kids on as long as possible. And they don't care about childhood. Like, honestly, they want the kids, they are having psychologists and research and like developing all these programs of like, how can we keep them on longer?
Yeah.
And it's pretty unethical when you think about it. Like,
Yeah,
it
this is
it
huge.
it
Yeah.
needs to. So I feel strongly that, like, parents, you're up against a huge brain like changing force that has been studied, and it's really, really difficult. So don't
Yeah,
blame
no, you're
yourself. And then I mean, if you think about it, like when we had internet, when we had TV as kids, it was not the same. We watched one show, it went off. There were commercials there. Now it's like you can play over and over. There's binge watching. There's suggestions of what you should watch next, and the algorithms and keeping that dopamine hits going with the likes and the comments and the notifications I mean, it's endless, and it's really difficult.
what you brought up comes up over and over again as I speak to all the experts I speak to. And the biggest thing that everybody says is what you just said, which is this is just not fair. It's not fair to the parents. First of all, to have to manage all this, but to have to endure the guilt, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, hey, maybe some of these choices aren't so healthy for my
Mm-hmm.
kid, right? It's not fair to the kids because we're putting them through this some of the tactics you talked about, which have to do with attention economy, right? Keeping
Mm-hmm.
them on, manipulating psychology to keep people on longer. And one of the things that I've been talking to a lot with the experts is that this is kind of a bigger societal issue, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there should be leadership from the top down, and this should not fall on the parents and the teachers and the kids themselves. But unfortunately, that's just where we are right
Mm-hmm.
now. And then the last thing I'll say about it, because I have to tell myself this all the time when I get frustrated with these issues, this is really a brand new issue.
It
I
really
mean,
is.
yeah, of course, we've had internet for a while and computers, things like that. But the iPhone came out in 2007. The algorithms, curation, AI, as we know it now, really didn't kick in until 2012. That is nothing in the course of modern
Right.
history. So we're really on those front lines.
I
And
feel like my kids were our guinea pigs. Like,
yeah,
I wrote my book because of this. In 2012, the iPad, like, my daughter was born, and around the same time as the iPad, it was the newest, coolest thing. And was like, this is neat, and I let her play with it. And I saw things firsthand. Like, she wouldn't like listen to me when she was on it. She would scream and cry when she got off of it, and then she would always ask again and again, like, when can I get it next? And
yeah,
I was like, this is not worth it. This screen time to me, not worth it. And I put it away in a drawer. And we stuck to TV like how I grew up, and it worked out. And now there's so much research that made it understand and makes sense. And now we know why and what's happening. And I wrote my book because I wanted to explain to kids why the value of turning screens off, and why we can't be on it all day long, and other things to do instead.
yeah. Um, so speaking of your book, this is something that I think you touch on a little bit. And we touched on it earlier too, but I'd love to hear you elaborate on this. Is it okay for parents to let their kids be bored, and why? I know we covered a little bit of it, but
Yes, yes. Boredom is like the cusp of like what's going to happen. So, like, it creates imagination and promotes imaginative play, creativity. Thinking. You think about, like, when you as an adult, like, where do you get your good ideas? For me,
yeah,
it's like in the shower. Why? Because I'm not doing anything else. There's nothing else going on that I'm like having to think about or do. And my brain is able to just process and flow and let things sink. And I will purposely like go out pulling weeds. And I'm like, I'm not going to plug into a book. I'm just going to be, and just relax and let my brain flow, because our brains get overstimulated in this world of so many things going on, and it just needs that downtime too, to like rest and recuperate, and then you can come up with your next idea or your next play activity, and it's a life skill to know what to do when you're bored and how to manage those feelings, because they are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not very fun to like be bored and not know what to do, but they have to learn how to manage instead of just getting something else to entertain them, whether it's screens or not screens.
Yeah. Um, I'm sure you're familiar with Anna Lemke's work. She did Dopamination, and she's one
Mhm.
of the first scientists to kind of come out and bring these ideas to the mainstream. But she talks about pleasure and pain is processed in the same part of the brain, right? And obviously, the obvious painful emotions would be, sadness, anxiety, things like that. But boredom is also on the pain side of the spectrum. So that's why, well meaning parents, like we talked about earlier, do want to kind of end that for their kids, because sometimes it can feel painful. But
Mhm.
if you sit in it long enough, it's something that you can sort of get used to, especially as a kid, right? Because
Mhm.
you mention imagination and things like that. Because when you're bored, your brain is not dormant, like you said. It's actually activating a different part of your brain, and that is the part where it's kind of making sense of the world. So everything you've taken in, talked about this a little bit.
Mhm.
It's sort of forming connections between things
Mhm.
you've learned, and it's just so important to have that time, even if it might feel a little bit painful.
Mhm.
But I would just say, and I don't know the brain science of this, but just from personal experience, like if you condition your kids for it, it'll be easier for them to be able to experience it and
Mhm.
for it to not feel painful, right?
Right.
For it to feel a little bit more like, okay, this is just a break,
Right.
for my brain. Or so I just wanted to add those points. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Like name it and say what you're feeling and say it's okay and you understand, empathize, it's uncomfortable, it's no fun. But I always frame it on like, hey, guess what? You get to decide what to do next. Like if you
yeah,
want me to tell you what to do, I have a list of things that you can do if you're bored. But it's giving them, it's putting them in charge. They're in charge of what they get to do.
yeah, it's so important for kids too to have that sense of autonomy for sure.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's get to your book, which I loved. I was telling you before we got on this that I've been really surprised to see that nobody's really done this yet. It's such a concern for every single parent. There's the latest Pew poll. I think it's 2/3 of parents believe that parenting is harder today than it was 20 years ago, and they attribute technology and smartphones and things like that. This is something that's on every parent's mind. And
Mhm.
I'm just so glad that you put out this book, because it's not judging, it's not shaming, it's none of the stuff, that we talked about earlier. But it's really just bringing this awareness to, hey, there's other things you can do, and here's what they are. So in the book, which you call Screens Away, Time to Play, you give so many of these inspiring ideas for screen-free activities. So I would love to ask you, what are your favorites? And I'd love to know for preschool and elementary. I don't know if you want to do those separately.
Yeah. So I love open-ended play. Like anything that can let the kids lead. So like just a cardboard box. Kids love when they're babies just to play with the packaging. But if you can just hand them a cardboard box and like some paint sticks or crayons or markers or paint, like whatever medium you want, and just let them create. They can go inside and just color. They can actually make like a car or a spaceship or um, a chef's kitchen, or I mean anything. It's so fun to watch the kids' imagination. And then I know I love to watch their little minds work when they're like sorting. Like that's a big skill when when they're toddlers and preschoolers, sorting objects, things like puzzles or, sorting socks. Like, play does not have to be these big, expensive things. Like, just very simple, and kids will play. And puzzles are also great. Board games, so that you can, get that family connection going. And then when they get old enough, you play them enough, they can play them on their own, and they can have the neighbors over and they're playing games, and they don't need the video games on, with the neighbors. Like, they can do other things. For elementary school, my kids, they're 9 and 11 now. And honestly, like, reading is so huge in my house. Like, they love to read. And I strongly attribute that to just having books all around through their whole childhood, reading to them every day. They've connected, and we have like that emotional bond. It gives them the feel good feelings. To just reading a book brings them back to like when we would sit together and read together. So, when people ask, like, well, what do you do instead? I'm like, my kids will wake up before me and read a book. Like, it's an investment that you're making when they're little, and it's a lot of work, but it really pays off when they're older, and you just kind of have to stick to it, and it's really, really great. Other things they like to do, all kinds of creative, just crafty things, and
Mhm.
like Lego, of course. That's open-ended. They can build whatever they want. They also, there's those kits, but that is also a privilege to be able to purchase those kits and things like that. But you don't have to have. You can create whatever you want with that. Like bead bracelets, making bracelets. Perler beads were a big hit. You iron those. Like, even pretend play when they're older. Like, my son was really into magic sets. Like, he's learning magic tricks, origami. It's these things that you kind of don't think about, but if you lean into their interests and you just expose them to different things, and then really, like, once they found something they really like, they go all in.
Yeah, I think what you said, and I've heard this time and time again, doing the work early on just pays off. It just pays crazy dividends later, right? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
if you allow them to play, set them up with these open-ended activities, talk with them at the restaurant, like whatever it is. I get it. Like, I want to check out too. It's a lot. But just putting that work in the beginning, it just saves you so much time, effort down the road, because the kids will be able to figure it out on their own if they're given that
Absolutely.
opportunity, and if you model those types of non-screen activities, like you said, they'll just pick it up on their own. And I mean, my kids are 7 and 10, almost 11, and I have to say, the box thing, we still do it.
Yep.
I put some stuff out for them to decorate it. And first it was a car, then it became, they put the dog in it and started carting the dog around the house. And this went on for hours, at their age. And it was like, it reminded me of some of those experiences they had even younger. So I guess I would just say, like, you'd be surprised. Like, I think some parents think, oh, my kid's too old for that or whatever.
Mhm.
But if you set them up for those opportunities, you'd be surprised at what they take
Right.
advantage of and how much time they'll actually put into it if it's open ended. So, and
Absolutely.
reading is huge in our house. I still read. I was telling you before we got on, I read your book to both of my kids, and they, in some families that might be considered a little too old to be reading to your kids, but um, my kids are also good independent readers, I think, because of that.
Mhm.
So I think that's super important, and they're never too old to be read to. There's so
Never.
many benefits of doing that together as parent and child that just last for a very, very long time. So those were the things that stood out, but so many great suggestions, and there's so many more in the book that
Yeah,
you
I
give.
wanted it I wanted it to be a resource for parents and for kids. Like, so when parents are like, it's time to get off, and then you have those arguments, they can say, hey, screens away, time to play, like reference the book and say, remember what we talked about. Like screens, yes, they're fine, but there's so much more learning to be done when they're off. And then if you don't know what to do, like here's all these ideas of things to do in a playful way that I tried to present that they'll look fun and inviting to the kids. And so then it's a resource that they can pull out when they are bored and don't know what to do. Then they've got these options that they can maybe spark some kind of interest, like an invitation to play.
Yeah, no, I loved it. Well, Kylan, thank you so much for your time today. I so appreciate what you do, advocating for play, all the work you've done, creating all these amazing activities. Obviously, your books and activity books, everything else are just so well done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.